Next up in our Cooking with Ulf series, we have the Bogo Indian. And we get to the Bogo Indian from our Catalan move order. And it should be noted, I'd like to throw in the Tarrasch here as well. With c5, I very much like taking. And this is the correct moment. After bishop e7, we take, and then go a3. And this is really the modern way to deal with the Tarrasch. We're avoiding, with knight c3, having to face these early knight e4 lines, which I consider to be roughly equal. And with a3, they get worried about b4, so I face a5 quite a lot. But that's a concession for black, because then after knight c3, we have the ability to use the b5 square. So often you see us just gaining a tempo, and white has easy play with knight c3, knight a4, and generally that's how we're facing the Tarrasch. The other line, it's really not too much of a concern. You get general straightforward play, but the main move that you're facing most often is this type of structure in the Tarrasch. Just play an early a3 without knight c3, and you'll be just fine. Now on to our main event in this variation with the Bogo Indian. After d4, it's bishop b4 check. And here, bishop d2, we offer our opponent taking, and we go rook c1. And it's got the same themes overall as the Catalan. Notice with the bishop on c8, it's locked in the pawn structure, and that's just a little bit inferior here. We're just going to go bishop g2, castle, queen c2, and look for the right moment to capture. And we have a very playable and solid position. In this main game after bishop b4, bishop d2, a5 was played. Queen e7 is also played quite often, and we look to create those imbalances with knight c3, rook c1, etc. But a5, queen c2, bishop g2, and here black goes c5. And this is Anderson versus, I guess it's Fricke, 2013. First gonna take, knight takes, e3, and we have an isolated pawn position. And you know how Ulf feels about imbalances. He loves them. Castles. Well, we'll take there. And I face this pawn structure quite a lot in the Tarrasch, as well as colors reversed in the Alpine Sicilian. And from my experience, this pawn structure is typically weak. We can play against this c-pawn, and what does Ulf do immediately? Rook c1, already eyeing the newly minted weakness, and that forces a concession where the bishop needs to be passive, holding on d7. Now let's improve. Sometimes we can throw a blockader here. We see already knight c3, knight a4, and let's clip this guy, and outpost on c5. Very clean, effective way to play against this weak pawn structure that black has. Rook fc8. Now, let's create the outside passer. Oh, you don't want me to do that? Well, you got to make a concession. Takes. And this game is over very quickly as we have a tactic in the position. White to play and win. See if you can find it. Takes. Bishop takes d5. And that's going to do it for this one. I would like to come back, because I do feel that we need to add in a little bit more, as bishop e7 is quite often played here in a very Catalan way, and just want to add in an extra note when facing this, that the way to play against it is get this bishop on d2 out of the way with bishop f4, and we're generally going to get this type of solid position that we're used to having. Knight e5 is completely fine, and on knight h5 you can go back and forth with bishop d2, and we're following, say, Ding Carlson 2021. Or if this isn't your cup of tea dealing with knight h5 at all, you can go knight c3, and if they play knight h5, You can even go bishop e3 like Ulf does in positions. But generally, it's a pretty straightforward Catalan position to play. So nothing really to worry about there overall. And as an added note, you don't really have to face the pure Bogo Indian because black is playing us holding back on the D pawn. This is the closest thing. It's kind of like Bogo Indian in quotation marks. On to the next video.